Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today we've got a wild Reddit story about a guy who spent his whole life living in the shadow of the golden child younger brother. It's a classic case of extreme parental favoritism, but just wait until you hear how a New Year's Eve party triggered a twisted, all over a secret bank account worth $215,000. Let's dive right in. I'm Arthur, 36 male, and I run a commercial solar maintenance operation. I'm not writing this to ask for sympathy or play the victim. I'm a grown man who built his own life. This is about what happens when you spend 3 decades being completely invisible in your own family, while your entitled brother gets worshipped as the second coming. I'm the older brother. Showed up first, had my time as an only child for 5 peaceful years. Then Leo was born and everything changed. Not gradually. Immediately. Like someone flipped a heavy breaker switch and suddenly the power to my side of the house was cut. I became set decoration in my own life. Look, I get it. New babies are exciting. Parents get wrapped up in that phase. But this wasn't that. This was entirely different. Leo wasn't just the new baby. He was the right baby, the one they actually wanted. Mom kept his baby book updated religiously, documenting every sneeze, every step, every mediocre crayon drawing through middle school. Mine? My baby book stopped dead after the first 3 months. It literally gathered dust on a bottom shelf. Dad took him to every single one of his activities. He'd stand on the sidelines of Leo's peewee basketball games, cheering himself hoarse while Leo rode the bench. Meanwhile, I'd ride my rusted 10-speed bike 3 miles in the pouring rain to the high school robotics club because Dad was busy with Leo's stuff. It's the small things that add up over 18 years until you wake up and realize you're boarding with people who barely acknowledge your existence. Leo was a completely average kid. He wasn't exceptionally talented, he wasn't a genius, yet Robert and Martha, my parents, treated him like he was destined for greatness. When we were kids, Leo wasn't malicious about it. He just didn't understand. He thought it was perfectly normal that he got the newest gaming console while I got socks. The favoritism wasn't his fault back then. But you learn to adapt. I stopped trying around 7th grade. I stopped bringing home science fair ribbons or math awards for them to ignore. I stopped hoping they'd show up to my state-level engineering competitions. I'd come home, do my homework in my room, eat dinner in dead silence while they fawned over Leo's day at middle school, and then I'd disappear back upstairs. I was a ghost. The definitive moment, the day the last shred of childish hope died in me, happened in the high school guidance counselor's office. I was 17. I had real, tangible scholarship offers on the table. The counselor, Mrs. Gable, was genuinely thrilled. She had a stack of folders laid out across her desk. Top-tier engineering programs were reaching out to me directly because of my robotics work and straight-A academic record. It was my ticket out. My parents sat next to me in those cheap plastic chairs, looking like they were waiting in line at the DMV. Dad was checking his watch. Mom was staring out the window. Right as Mrs. Gable was explaining how a full-ride scholarship would cover my entire tuition, Mom's phone buzzed. It was a text from Leo. He needed a ride home early from basketball practice because he had a slight headache. Without a word of apology, Dad stood up. "We have to go. Leo needs us." They walked out, just stood up mid-sentence, mid-meeting, and walked out the door to pick up their precious 16-year-old who was entirely capable of taking the bus. Mrs. Gable stopped talking. She looked at me, and her expression was a mix of profound pity and absolute confusion. She tried to salvage the moment, softly saying we could just review the paperwork together. Just the two of us. But I didn't need to hear the rest. I knew right then, with absolute, ice-cold clarity, that I was completely on my own. I always had been. There was no safety net. If I was going to make anything of my life, it was going to be built with my own 2 hands. Look, I'm someone who really values education. There is absolutely no excuse for parents to blow off a major scholarship meeting just because their golden child has a minor headache. OP's parents are incredibly biased. I honestly have no idea what they were thinking. I could have lived with the neglect. Neglect just makes you tough. But what happened a few years later crossed the line from neglect into active betrayal. This is the part that still makes my jaw clench when I think about it. I was 22. I had been busting my ass doing odd jobs, saving every single dollar I could scrape together. The solar industry was starting to boom, and I saw a massive gap in maintenance. Everyone wanted to install the panels, but nobody wanted to drive out to the middle of nowhere to clean and fix them when they broke. To start my hustle, I needed a work vehicle. I spent months hunting and finally dropped my entire life savings on a 2004 Ford F-150. It was beat up, the paint was peeling, and it smelled faintly of old oil and sweat, but the engine was solid. It was mine. It was my independence. It was the foundation of the business I was trying to build. I spent 3 weekends in the driveway replacing the brakes and tuning it up myself. One Saturday night, I came home dead tired from a 14-hour shift and crashed. I left my keys on the kitchen counter. Leo was 17 at the time, just a few months away from graduating high school. He had a party to get to, and Dad had taken the family SUV on a weekend fishing trip. 2 a.m., my phone rang. It was the local police. I rushed down to the precinct. Leo had taken my truck without asking, gotten drunk with his buddies, and wrapped the front end around a concrete light pole on a back road. The truck was absolutely totaled. The entire front bumper was crushed into the engine block. My livelihood, my independence, my entire savings, crumpled into twisted metal. When Mom and Dad arrived at the station, I expected rage. I expected them to tear into Leo. Instead, the manipulation began. And it was sickening. They didn't ask if I was okay. Even though I was shaking with anger, Mom immediately started hyperventilating, but not about the fact that her youngest son could have died. She was panicking about his record. He has that prestigious summer internship lined up. He's starting college in the fall. A DUI and grand theft auto charge will ruin his life. His future will be over. Dad pulled me into the hallway. His face was desperate, eyes pleading. Not for me. Never for me. Arthur, you have to take the fall for this. Tell the cops you were driving. Tell them you swerved to miss a deer. You're older. You don't have a corporate career path like Leo does. A minor traffic incident on your record won't destroy you. You're just doing manual labor right now anyway. I stared at him, feeling the blood pounding in my ears. He stole my truck, Dad. He destroyed my business. He could have killed someone. He made a mistake. Mom hissed, grabbing my arm, her nails digging into my jacket. He's your baby brother. If you love this family, you will protect him. If you don't do this, we will never forgive you. They tag-teamed me for an hour. The guilt trips, the crying, the threats of being disowned. At 22, still possessing a microscopic shred of hope that maybe, just maybe, if I did this ultimate sacrifice, they would finally love me and see my value, I caved. I walked into that precinct, lied to the cops, and took the blame for the crash. Hold up, let me pause here for a second. Making your innocent son take a felony charge and a DUI to protect your careless younger kid? That completely crosses the line from toxic parenting straight into criminal coercion. They essentially blackmailed a 22-year-old by threatening to disown him, costing him his truck and his livelihood just so Leo could keep partying. That is genuinely disgusting. The consequences were immediate and devastating. The insurance company refused to pay out because of the circumstances I had to invent. I was left with absolutely nothing. $0. No vehicle. Leo didn't even get a slap on the wrist. He went off to his internship the next week driving a brand new sedan Mom and Dad leased for him, to ensure he had safe transportation. He never even offered a genuine apology. Just a smirk and a thanks for having my back, bro. For the next year and a half, while Leo was living it up at frat parties, I paid the price for his crime. I had to wake up at 4:30 a.m. to catch 2 different city buses to get to the solar fields. When the bus route ended, I rode a cheap bicycle the last 4 miles, carrying a 50-pound canvas bag of heavy tools strapped to my back. In the pouring rain, in the blistering heat, every time the straps cut into my shoulders, every time a car splashed me on the side of the highway, the resentment calcified. That was the year the son they knew died, and the man I am today was forged. I swore to myself under the blazing sun that I would never, ever let them or anyone else use me again. I eventually left for college, a solid-state engineering program. My academic record and the robotic scholarships paid off. It was a full ride. The scholarship covered every single dime. Tuition, room, board, and books. I needed exactly $0 from Robert and Martha, which was incredibly convenient for them, because they offered me nothing. Not $1 for groceries, not a congratulatory dinner. Just a nod and a good luck. Leo, on the other hand, barely scraped by with a 2.8 GPA. But he was the golden child, so only the best would do. He got accepted into some mediocre, overpriced private college with a supposedly elite business program. The cost? A staggering $45,000 a year. My parents co-signed massive loans, drained their savings, and threw him a going-away party in the backyard with catered food and probably 200 guests. They bought him a customized cake with the university's logo. I didn't attend. I was busy working a double shift to afford my own steel-toed boots. College was the first time I actually took a deep breath. For years where nobody compared me to Leo, nobody ignored my accomplishments. Nobody made me feel like I was taking up oxygen I didn't deserve. I went home exactly 3 times in 4 years. Thanksgiving my freshman year, Christmas my sophomore year, and one random Tuesday my junior year when I desperately needed to grab my original birth certificate from the filing cabinet. Each visit was a harsh reminder of why I stayed away. The house was a shrine to Leo. Every conversation was a monologue about his fraternity, his networking events, his incredibly important opinions on the stock market. I'd sit at the dinner table, chew my food, and they'd talk at me, not to me. How's school? Fine. Good. Now, Leo's professor said. I became a master at tuning them out. After graduation, while my classmates were fighting for cubicle jobs, I went back to the dirt. I took the engineering degree and applied it to the physical world. I saw the massive vulnerability in the rapidly expanding solar grid, maintenance and operations. I started my hustle again, saving aggressively, and eventually bought a decent, reliable work truck. I went out to the desert. The work is brutal. It's not sitting in an ergonomic chair typing on a MacBook. It's physical, unforgiving labor. I'm talking about climbing 50-foot mounting structures, hauling heavy glass panels, and troubleshooting high-voltage inverters in 105-degree heat. The sun out there doesn't just shine. It beats you down. Your skin gets leathery. Your hands get calloused and scarred from slipped wrenches and sharp metal edges. You sweat through your shirt by 9 a.m. But there is a profound, primal satisfaction in it. Every single dollar I make, I bleed for. Every contract I secure, I earn through competence and grit, not because someone's dad made a phone call. Word spread fast. A guy who actually shows up on time, fixes the thermal degradation issues correctly the first time, and doesn't overcharge? I was gold. 1 contract became 3. 3 became a dozen. I incorporated, hired a helper, and started scaling. Meanwhile, Leo was failing upward. He graduated with his overpriced degree and immediately expected to be handed a corner office because he thought he was a genius. Reality hit him, but it didn't stick. He bounced through 4 different corporate jobs in 3 years. Mom called it finding his true passion. I called it getting fired for being an insufferable, arrogant prick who couldn't take direction from his bosses. And of course, every single time Leo crashed and burned, Robert and Martha were there with the checkbook. They covered his exorbitant city rent. They made his car payments. They funded his lifestyle so he wouldn't have to lower his standards while he figured things out. They'd mention it to me on our rare phone calls, sighing about how hard the job market was for exceptional talents like Leo, waiting for me to validate their enabling. I never did. I just listened to the wind howling across the desert plains and went back to work. When you spend your life keeping your head down and grinding, you don't really have time for romance. You definitely don't have time for people who play games. That's why meeting Claire felt like a lightning strike. It was 6 years ago at a massive solar industry conference in Las Vegas. I hated these corporate events. Too many guys in expensive suits who had never held a torque wrench in their lives trying to sell snake oil. I was only there to check out some new mounting hardware technology. I slipped into a breakout session in a stuffy conference room focused on efficiency losses in extreme desert temperatures. It was my daily reality, so I figured I might learn something. The presenter was a slick corporate guy clicking through a PowerPoint, throwing out buzzwords to a room full of nodding executives. He started talking about the hardware failure rates and confidently spouted some complete nonsense about the metal brackets failing due to wind vibration rather than heat expansion. Before I could even roll my eyes, a woman 3 rows ahead of me raised her hand and didn't wait to be called on. "Excuse me," she said, her voice clear, authoritative, and totally devoid of the usual corporate politeness. "Your thermal expansion coefficients are completely off. If you factor in the delta T of a standard Nevada summer day, the shear stress on the bolts exceeds your stated tolerance by at least 40%. It's not wind vibration. Your brackets are literally warping in the heat and shearing the bolts. Have you actually run finite element analysis on this, or are you just projecting based on lab conditions?" The room went dead silent. The presenter stammered, fumbled with his clicker, and muttered a pathetic non-answer about further field testing. I couldn't take my eyes off her. She was wearing a practical blazer, her hair tied back, and she possessed an aura of absolute competence that was intoxicating. After the session awkwardly ended, I practically shoved my way through the crowd to catch her in the hallway. "Hey," I said, "you absolutely gutted that guy in there. It was beautiful, and you're dead right about the shear stress. I replace those exact sheared bolts every week." She stopped and looked me up and down. She didn't offer a fake smile. She looked at my hands, calloused, permanently stained with grease in the knuckles, and then looked me in the eye. "I'm Claire, mechanical engineer for Apex Systems, and I have zero patience for guys in suits trying to sell defective hardware to people who actually have to do the work." "Arthur," I said, shaking her hand, "I run a commercial maintenance crew. I'm the guy who has to do the work." We ended up grabbing terrible convention center coffee and sitting in a quiet corner for 2 solid hours. We didn't talk about the weather or pop culture. We talked about supply chain logistics, metallurgy, voltage drops, and the reality of building a business. She was incredibly sharp, ruthlessly logical, and unapologetically direct. She didn't need to be coddled. She respected hard work and despised incompetence. By the time we exchanged numbers, I knew my life had fundamentally shifted. We started texting about work stuff, schematics, contract negotiations, venting about idiot suppliers. Then it turned into late-night phone calls. Then dinner. We understood each other on a baseline level. We both valued equity over flash. 6 months into dating, I knew she was the woman I was going to marry. But there was a massive hurdle we had to clear first. She had to meet my family. I tried to warn her. I spent hours trying to explain the dynamic, the golden child syndrome, the dismissive attitude, the deep-seated delusion my parents operated under. "Arthur," she had said, adjusting her glasses, "I deal with arrogant project managers and hostile contractors for a living. I can handle a family dinner." "You don't understand," I warned her, gripping the steering wheel as we drove toward my parents' house. "You can't logic your way out of their delusion. Just promise me you won't take anything they say to heart." She just patted my leg. "Let's just get it over with." The first dinner at Robert and Martha's house went exactly as I expected. Only the blast radius was wider because Claire wasn't the type to just take a beating in silence. We walked through the front door, and immediately, the temperature felt off. Mom gave Claire a stiff, obligatory hug, looking her up and down, clearly assessing her practical clothes and lack of heavy makeup. Dad offered a firm handshake that was more of a dominance test. Leo was already lounging on the living room sofa with his flavor-of-the-month girlfriend, swirling a glass of cheap whiskey like he was a Wall Street titan. We sat down at the dining table for the usual production: roast chicken, dry potatoes, and tension thick enough to cut with a chainsaw. Mom, feigning polite interest, turned to Claire. "So Arthur tells us you're an engineer? What exactly do you do?" "Drafting. I'm a senior mechanical engineer," Claire started, her voice steady. "I design and stress test industrial mounting structures for large-scale energy grids. Currently, I'm managing a project that reminds me." Dad cut in loudly, completely ignoring Claire's sentence. He pointed his fork at the other end of the table. Leo, tell them the news. Tell them what your boss said on Friday. I watched Claire's expression shift. The polite guest face vanished, replaced by the clinical, fascinated look of a scientist observing a bizarre species in a zoo. Leo puffed out his chest, leaning back in his chair. Well, it's not official yet, but I've been bumped up to senior data analyst. Youngest in the department. My manager said my market forecasting is reshaping the division's Q3 strategy. Senior analyst. Mom clapped her hands together. Oh, Leo, we are so incredibly proud of you. You have such a brilliant mind for business. She turned to me, a condescending smile plastered on her face. Isn't that wonderful, Arthur? Your brother is doing so well in the corporate world. That's great, I said flatly, trying to chew my food. I made the mistake of trying to pivot the conversation back to reality. Actually, my company just landed a major maintenance contract with a 50-megawatt farm out in the valley. We're hiring 2 more guys. Mom nodded slowly, her eyes glazed over. That's nice, honey. Keeping busy. She immediately looked back to Leo. So, do you get a corner office with the promotion? Leo smirked, swirling his glass. He looked over at me, his eyes full of that familiar, arrogant pity. You know, Arthur, if you ever get tired of playing handyman and climbing around on hot metal all day, I could probably get you an interview in our mailroom or facilities department. Good benefits. Beats getting a sunburn while fixing broken glass. The silence at the table was heavy. I gripped my fork, ready to tell him where to shove his offer, but Claire beat me to it. She put her silverware down, wiped her mouth with a napkin, and leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. Her eyes locked onto Leo like target acquisition. Playing handyman? Claire said, her voice dangerously calm and perfectly polite. Arthur owns a fully incorporated commercial logistics and maintenance operation. He handles complex electrical grid troubleshooting, manages a fleet of vehicles, handles payroll for his crew, and navigates commercial insurance and liability protocols. He builds actual equity. She tilted her head, giving Leo a razor-sharp smile. Now, remind me, Leo, as a data analyst, what is it you actually do? Leo blinked, taken aback by the direct challenge. I analyze market trends. I compile data on investment performances and create forecasting models for our brokers. Claire nodded slowly, pretending to process this. I see. So you make reports about numbers that someone else actually cussed and sweat to earn. The temperature in the dining room dropped 20 degrees. I almost choked on my water. Mom gasped, clutching her pearls. Dad's face flushed dark red. Leo tried to save face, puffing his chest back out. He started word-vomiting corporate buzzwords: synergy, leverage, agile forecasting, KPI matrices, trying to drown her in jargon. It was a fatal mistake. Claire holds a master's degree in engineering and runs logistics for multimillion-dollar projects. She eats corporate fluff for breakfast. Fascinating, Claire interrupted him mid-sentence. Since you're the senior analyst, I'd love to learn. Can you explain the algorithmic weight you assign to geopolitical supply chain disruptions versus localized inflation when projecting those Q3 yields? What's your standard deviation margin of error? Leo froze. His mouth opened and closed. He had absolutely no idea what she was talking about because his job was basically making pie charts in Excel. He fumbled, muttered something about proprietary software, and stared at his plate. He looked like he'd been run over by a freight train. By the end of the dinner, Robert and Martha looked at Claire with pure, undisguised hatred. She hadn't yelled. She hadn't insulted anyone. She had simply refused to participate in their shared delusion, and for that, she was the enemy. In the car on the way home, the tension drained out of me. Claire looked out the window and sighed. Your family is a piece of work, Arthur. I warned you, I said softly. She turned to me, her eyes fierce. Listen to me. Your brother is painfully average at best. He's mediocre. Your parents have spent his entire life convincing him he's special. and they've spent your entire life trying to make you feel like you aren't enough because your success highlights his failures. It's a pathetic dynamic, and you are 10 times the man he will ever be. I'm honestly such a huge fan of Claire. This delusional family seriously needs a reality check, and Claire is exactly the person to bring them back down to earth. Leo thinks he can just throw around corporate buzzwords to intimidate a blue-collar worker, but he clearly forgets that Claire is a literal mechanical engineer. Unfortunately for him, he picked the wrong one this time. I pulled the truck over to the side of the road and put it in park. I just sat there, gripping the wheel. It was the first time in 30 years that another human being had said out loud what I had known in my bones my whole life. I looked at her, and I knew right then, this was my family now. We got married a year later. It was a small, elegant ceremony. My parents attended out of a sense of grim obligation. They sat in the back row with sour expressions, complaining about the food and the music. Leo brought another random date and spent the entire reception scrolling on his phone, looking utterly bored. The contrast with Claire's family was jarring. Her parents treated me with more respect and genuine warmth in one weekend than my own blood had in 3 decades. Her father, Dave, a retired structural engineer, spent 2 hours at the reception cornering me to talk about the solar industry. He wasn't just making small talk, he was actively interested in my business model. A month later, he made a few phone calls to some old colleagues in commercial real estate, and just like that, he helped me land 2 massive, multi-year maintenance contracts. He helped me because he respected competence, not because we shared DNA. After the wedding, I effectively put my parents on ice. Minimal contact. A text on Thanksgiving, a 5-minute phone call on birthdays. I stopped initiating, stopped trying to win a game that was rigged against me from birth. I just existed at arm's length, a ghost they occasionally remembered. While Leo kept cycling through groundbreaking jobs that never seemed to last more than 9 months, Claire and I went to war. We didn't fight people, we fought for our future. We lived drastically below our means. While my peers were financing luxury SUVs to look wealthy, I drove my 10-year-old work truck, and Claire drove a reliable used Honda. We rented a modest apartment, cooked at home, and stacked every single extra dollar we made. We were building an empire in absolute silence. Claire was making excellent money as a senior project manager. My solar operation exploded. The work I had put in during those grueling desert summers was paying off exponentially. I hired 2 more full-time technicians and bought a second truck. My overhead was incredibly low because I ran a tight ship. No fancy office, no unnecessary administrative bloat. By my 35th birthday, my little handyman business was clearing $450,000 annually in contract revenue. Combined with Claire's salary, our total household income was exceptional. We were pulling in serious money, and because we lived in a relatively low cost of living area and didn't care about keeping up with the Joneses, our savings rate was massive. We were tucking away over $220,000 a year between investments, high-yield savings, and business equity. We had a clear target: save enough cash to buy a beautiful house outright, expand the commercial fleet, and build an unbreakable fortress of financial security. We were sitting on a mountain of quiet wealth. Meanwhile, my family still treated me like the struggling blue-collar worker they desperately needed me to be. Whenever Mom called, she would use this hushed, pitying tone, asking if I was making ends meet out there in the sun. She'd then smoothly transition into bragging about Leo's newest corporate adventure and how they were helping him with the down payment on a luxury condo because he needed to project success to his clients. I never corrected them. I never told them about the contracts, the revenue, or the savings accounts. What was the point? To them, my success would always be a direct threat to Leo's narrative. I let them live in their fantasy world while I built my reality. It was peaceful, until the holidays rolled around, and the trap was set. 3 months before the end of the year, Mom called me in a panic. The HVAC system at their house had died entirely, and a local repair company had quoted them $4,000 to fix it. Suddenly, the blue-collar son was very useful. "Arthur, please," she begged over the phone. "You work with electronics and wiring. Can you just come look at it? Dad's back is hurting, and we can't afford to get ripped off right now. You know, we just helped Leo with his condo fees. Against my better judgment, I drove over on a Saturday morning. I spent 4 hours in their dusty, sweltering attic, tracing wires, replacing a burnt-out capacitor, and cleaning the condenser coils. I got it running perfectly. I didn't charge them a dime for the labor or the parts. When I climbed down, covered in sweat and fiberglass dust, Mom handed me a lukewarm glass of water and didn't even say thank you. Instead, she spent the next hour following me around as I packed up my heavy tools, talking exclusively about Leo. He's dating a new girl, Chloe, Mom said, her eyes shining. She's in pharmaceutical sales, makes incredible money. She drives a Porsche, Arthur, a Porsche, and Leo is just killing it at his new data firm. He's managing massive portfolios now. We're just so proud. I zipped up my tool bag, the heavy canvas rough against my knuckles. I had just saved them thousands of dollars with manual labor, and they couldn't go 15 minutes without making it about the golden child. As I walked to my truck, she threw the hook. Oh, by the way, we're doing the big New Year's Eve party this year. The whole family is coming. Uncle Dave, the cousins, everyone. Leo and Chloe will be the guests of honor, of course. You and Claire really need to be there. It's a family tradition. I wanted to say no. I was exhausted, but I knew the drill. If we skipped it, the guilt trips would be relentless. The passive-aggressive texts would last until Easter. You're tearing the family apart, Dad would say. I got home and pitched it to Claire. She was sitting at the kitchen island, reviewing blueprints. She looked up, her jaw tightening. One more time, I told her, feeling the weariness in my bones. We go to this New Year's Eve party, show our faces, eat some food, and leave early. If it's the same toxic garbage as always, if they try to demean us, we are officially done. We draw the line. No more family events. Ever. Claire set her pen down. She looked me dead in the eye, her expression hardened steel. Fine. We'll go. But Arthur, hear me right now. At the very first sign of disrespect, the first smug comment from Leo, the first condescending sigh from your mother, we are walking out that door. No drawn-out goodbyes. No keeping the peace. We leave. Deal, I said. We had no idea we were walking into a powder keg. And we certainly had no idea that Leo, in all his arrogant glory, was about to light the match that would burn his entire privileged life to the ground. We pulled up to my parents' house around 7:30 p.m. on New Year's Eve. The street was lined with cars. You could hear the muffled thumping of a bass line from halfway down the block. Mom had clearly gone all out. The house was blazing with lights. There was a massive catering tent set up on the back patio, and the driveway was packed with the mid-size SUVs of every aunt, uncle, and cousin in a 50-mile radius. I parked my work truck at the very end of the street, taking a deep breath of the freezing December air before looking over at Claire. She gave me a single, sharp nod. We were on the clock. The moment we walked through the front door, the suffocating atmosphere hit me. It wasn't just the smell of expensive catered appetizers or the heat of too many bodies packed into a suburban living room. It was the sheer, radiating smugness. Mom met us in the foyer, wearing a dress that definitely cost more than my first set of power tools. Oh, you made it, she said, her smile tight. Go on in. Leo and Chloe are in the main living room. He's telling everyone about his new portfolio strategy. We walked into the living room, and it looked like a scene from a low-rent Wall Street movie. Leo was holding court. He was standing by the fireplace, wearing a tailored suit jacket over a crisp t-shirt, swirling a glass of amber liquid. About 6 or 7 relatives, including Uncle Dave and Aunt Susan, were clustered around him, hanging on his every word. Beside him stood Chloe, a woman whose entire personality seemed to be checking her phone every 30 seconds and looking bored. So I looked at the algorithmic projections. Leo was saying loudly, making sure his voice carried over the background music. And I realized the senior brokers were completely miscalculating the geopolitical risk factors. I essentially rebuilt the entire approach from scratch. Saved the client something like $4 million in potential losses just in Q4. Dad was standing right next to him, beaming like Leo had just cured a major disease. The relatives were nodding along, impressed by a salad of corporate buzzwords they didn't even understand. Claire leaned close to me, her breath warm against my ear. "I'm getting a drink," she whispered. "Maybe 3. If I have to listen to this guy invent his own importance for another minute, I'm going to start asking him about his calculus grades." Dinner was the usual agonizing production. 20 people crammed around an extended dining table, eating roast beef while Mom went around the room asking everyone for their highlight of the year. When it was my turn, I kept it brief. Landed a solid, long-term commercial maintenance contract with a solar farm out in the Nevada flats. Good money, stable work. We're healthy, and the business is growing. "That's nice, Arthur," Mom said dismissively, not even making eye contact before immediately swiveling her chair. "Now, Leo, tell everyone the details about your new firm." Leo launched into a 20-minute monologue about his career trajectory, his networking skills, and how he was supposedly on a fast track to making partner before he turned 40. I caught Uncle Dave's eye across the table. Dave just gave me a subtle, sympathetic grimace. He knew. He was a retired engineer. He knew the difference between building something real and just moving invisible numbers around on a screen. After dinner, the party fractured. People spread out into the kitchen and the patio. I was perfectly happy standing in a quiet corner of the hallway, checking my phone for weather updates on a job site, when Leo suddenly appeared. He had that predatory, arrogant glint in his eye. "Arthur, got a minute?" he asked, not really waiting for an answer. "I want to show you something in the den." I sighed, putting my phone in my pocket. I followed him into Dad's wood-paneled den. I immediately realized it was a setup. Several relatives, including Dad, Uncle Dave, and 2 cousins, had trailed behind us, clearly prompted by Leo beforehand. Claire caught my eye from across the room, her expression sharpening into a silent warning. "Here we go." Leo had his sleek silver laptop set up on the mahogany desk. There was a massive, complicated-looking financial dashboard pulled up on the screen, full of neon-colored line graphs and pie charts. It looked like the control room of a spaceship, but knowing Leo, it was all flash and zero substance. "Check this out," Leo said, his voice projecting so the gathered relatives could hear. "This is how I track my personal wealth portfolio. It integrates with all your brokerages, shows real-time performance metrics, and projects compound growth based on aggressive market conditions. This is professional-grade software, Arthur." The relatives crowded closer, making impressed noises at the pretty colors. "This is how you actually manage money in the modern age," Leo continued, looking directly at me with a sickeningly sweet smile. "Not just letting it rot in some basic, low-yield checking account at a local credit union earning basically zero. I know things are probably tight for you with the manual labor and all, but you have to start thinking about the future." I crossed my arms. "My money is doing just fine where it is, Leo. I'm not worried about it." He pushed back, stepping closer, smelling like expensive cologne and cheap whiskey. "Are you sure? Because inflation is eating you alive. What's your return rate? 0.5%? I could show you how to actually build wealth instead of just treading water repairing broken glass in the dirt. I mean, realistically, how much do you even have saved up for emergencies? 20 grand? 30 grand if you and Claire have been aggressively clipping coupons." When I told him firmly that my finances were absolutely none of his business, he went in for the kill. He put on a mask of fake, brotherly concern. "Arthur, I'm not judging you," Leo said, his voice dripping with condescension. "I know you don't make professional-level money. You work a blue-collar job. It is what it is. I'm just trying to help you maximize whatever little nest egg you've managed to scrape together, so you aren't working until you're 70. A couple of the cousins chuckled. Once again, I was the punchline. The poor, struggling older brother needing a handout of wisdom from the golden child. Claire suddenly appeared next to me. The air around her felt electric. "Leo," she said, her voice like cracking ice, "be very careful how you finish that thought." Leo doubled down, puffing his chest. "I'm just being realistic, Claire. Arthur works a job that doesn't exactly come with stock options or huge bonuses. I'm offering him my professional expertise for free. I was about to grab Claire's hand and walk out the front door, just like we agreed. But then Leo made the biggest mistake of his completely sheltered, consequence-free life. He reached out and tapped my smartphone, which was sitting on the edge of the desk. "Come on," Leo smirked, looking around at the audience he had gathered. "Pull up your banking app. Let's just run a quick savings calculator. I bet you've got maybe 20,000 in there, and you're just too proud to admit you need help managing it. That's why you're being so defensive." The relatives laughed again. Some awkwardly, some genuinely amused. Something inside my chest snapped. It wasn't hot, explosive anger. It was something entirely different. It was an absolute, sub-zero absolute zero coldness. I was 36 years old. I had rebuilt my life from the wreckage of a stolen truck and broken promises. I was done being the punching bag for a guy who couldn't change a tire if his life depended on it. "You really want to know, Leo?" I asked, my voice terrifyingly calm. Leo nodded, the smirk still plastered on his face. "Let's see what we're working with. Show the class." "All right, everyone, I've got to ask you something. If your arrogant sibling went out of their way to humiliate you in front of the entire family by demanding to see your bank balance, what would you do? Would you just shut it down, keep your finances private, and walk away to keep the peace? Or would you put them in their place and teach them a lesson about never judging a book by its cover? Let me know in the comments." I didn't hesitate. I didn't blink. I pulled my phone out of my pocket, unlocked it with my thumb, opened my primary business-linked personal savings account, and handed the phone directly to him. "Here," I said. "Give me some professional advice." Leo took the phone, holding it up slightly so the glare of the screen caught his face. His smirk was still there, ready to deliver a patronizing lecture about budgeting. That smirk lasted exactly 3 seconds. I watched the exact moment his reality shattered. It was a physical transformation. All the blood completely drained out of his face, leaving him looking like a wax mannequin. His eyes widened to the point that I thought they might roll out of his skull. His hand, holding my phone, started to shake. A fine, rapid tremor that rattled the device. "What is it?" Mom's voice floated in from the doorway. She had pushed her way to the front of the crowd, sensing a shift in the room's energy. "Leo, honey, what's wrong?" Leo couldn't speak. His mouth opened, but only a strangled, breathless sound came out. He stared at the glowing screen like it was a live grenade. This is a joke. This can't be real." "It's real," I said, my voice cutting through the dead silence of the room. "What is it?" Dad demanded, stepping up right behind Leo and peering over his shoulder at the screen. Dad's face went through a rapid-fire slideshow of emotions. Confusion, absolute shock, and then a strange, panicked blankness. Leo finally found his voice, though it was weak and wavering. He held the phone up with a trembling hand, turning the screen toward the relatives. "Arthur he has $215,000 in savings." The room went completely, utterly silent. The kind of silence where the sound of the bass from the stereo in the other room suddenly felt deafening. You could have heard a pin drop on the thick carpet. Uncle Dave's eyebrows shot up so high they practically disappeared into his hairline. My cousin's jaw literally dropped open. Mom was the first one to break the spell. She shook her head, letting out a nervous, high-pitched laugh. No, that's impossible. That's a glitch. Arthur fixes solar panels on roofs. He's a mechanic. He can't possibly have that much money sitting in an account." "But he does," Leo whispered, still staring at my phone as if the numbers were physically attacking him. "It's right here. Available balance. $215,430. And it's not an investment portfolio. It's just raw cash." Claire crossed her arms, her posture radiating absolute dominance. She looked at Mom, then at Leo. "Turns out, hard work pays incredibly well when you actually own the commercial business. Hold the multi-year contracts, and don't blow your money on leased luxury cars and overpriced city condos to pretend you're wealthy." Leo's shock was rapidly morphing into something ugly, desperate, and vicious. The fragile architecture of his ego was collapsing, and he was panicking. How? Leo practically yelled, his voice cracking. He shoved the phone back into my chest. How? You're crawling around in the dirt in the middle of nowhere. You're a blue-collar grunt. There is no physical way you earn this much doing maintenance work. I caught the phone and slipped it back into my pocket. I own the operation, Leo. I have for 6 years now. My commercial contract revenue runs about $450,000 annually. My overhead is low because I actually know how to manage a crew efficiently. Claire makes an excellent salary as a senior engineer. We don't have debt. We don't have massive car payments. We save aggressively. It's pretty basic math. You should know that, being a senior analyst and all. Dad found his voice, his face flushing dark purple. You own a company? A $500,000 company? Since when? 6 years, Dad. You never told us that. Mom screeched, her defensive anger flaring up immediately to protect her worldview. I did actually, I replied calmly. Multiple times. You just never listened. You didn't care to ask. You just assumed I was a failure because it made it easier to celebrate Leo. We thought you were doing handyman work. Mom yelled, tears of frustration pricking her eyes. You let us think you were struggling. I didn't let you think anything. You wrote the script in your own heads. I fired back, my voice finally rising, the 30 years of repressed anger bleeding into my tone. I told you years ago I started an LLC for commercial solar grid maintenance. You were too busy patting Leo on the back for surviving a corporate team-building retreat to ask a single follow-up question. The relatives were watching this play out in stunned silence. Uncle Dave looked at me with an expression of profound, quiet respect. But Leo wasn't done spiraling. His entire identity was built on being the superior, successful, wealthy brother. Facing the truth that I could buy and sell his entire lifestyle with liquid cash broke his brain. So what? Leo spat, his face red and sweaty. You've been hiding this from us on purpose? Playing the poor, pathetic older brother while sitting on $250,000? You did this just to embarrass me tonight. I wasn't playing anything, Leo, I said, stepping right up to him. You all decided I was a loser and treated me accordingly. I just didn't bother correcting you because, frankly, I stopped caring about your approval the night you destroyed my truck and let me take the fall. Mom gasped at the mention of the truck. That is ancient history. That is your brother. Family helps family, Arthur. Claire let out a sharp, mocking laugh that cut through the room like a knife. Family helps family? That's hilarious. Where were you when he was 22, riding the bus in the rain carrying 50 pounds of tools because you made him take a felony charge for your golden boy? Where were you when he was building his business from nothing? Where were you for literally any achievement in his entire life? We have always supported Arthur, Dad bellowed, but his voice shook. Even he knew it was a lie. You barely acknowledge he exists unless you need your AC fixed for free, Claire snapped back, stepping between me and my parents. But sure, keep telling yourselves you supported him. Keep living in your delusion. Mom turned her wrath on Claire. You don't understand our family dynamics. You haven't been part of this family long enough to speak to us like this. I understand enough, Claire said, completely unfazed. I understand that you raised one son to be a parasitic narcissist who thinks he's exceptional, and you tried to raise the other to think he was worthless. Luckily for Arthur, he didn't believe you. That is enough, Dad roared. But Leo was pacing now like a caged animal. He pointed a shaking finger at me. You know what this is? This is you competing with me. You can't stand that I'm the educated, successful one. So you hoarded cash to try and one-up me. You showed off that balance specifically to humiliate me in front of Chloe and the family. I actually laughed. A genuine, hollow laugh. Leo, I promise you, I do not think about you enough to compete with you. I built my life because I wanted to be secure. None of it had anything to do with you. Liar! Leo yelled, veins popping in his neck. You practically demanded to show me your phone. You wanted to humiliate me. You literally grabbed his phone and demanded to see it to make a joke out of him. You absolute clown, Claire shot back. The party was completely dead. Every single person in the house was staring at the doorway of the den. Mom's perfect New Year's celebration was in ashes, and a part of me thought I should feel guilty. But I dug deep, and I realized I felt absolutely nothing but a cold, hard sense of closure. Leo grabbed his expensive tailored coat from the back of the leather chair. His movements were jerky, erratic, and aggressive. He looked at me with pure, unadulterated venom. "You think you're better than me, Arthur? I think I don't need your approval to exist anymore," I replied. Leo's face contorted. "Chloe, we're leaving. Now." His new girlfriend looked terrified but incredibly relieved to have an escape route. She practically ran to the front door. Leo stormed out behind her without saying goodbye to anyone. The front door slammed so hard the windows rattled. Mom immediately wheeled on me, her face streaked with mascara. "Did you have to do that? Did you have to humiliate your brother like that on New Year's Eve?" "He humiliated himself by trying to bully me, Mom. You could have lied," she screamed, her logic completely abandoning her. "You could have said you had less. You didn't have to throw your money in his face and break his confidence." Dad backed her up, stepping aggressively toward me. "There were better ways to handle this, Arthur. Ways that didn't involve making Leo face reality so harshly." I didn't even argue. I just looked at my parents, realizing for the final time how deeply broken they were. They were actually demanding that I lie about my own hard-earned success to protect the fragile ego of the son who had abused me. "We're leaving," I said, grabbing Claire's hand. "Good," Dad spat. "You've done enough damage for one night." We walked out into the freezing night, got into my truck, and drove in silence for about 10 miles. Then, out of nowhere, Claire started laughing. A deep, disbelieving laugh. "Your mother actually blamed you for his meltdown," Claire wheezed. "She told you to lie about your own bank account to protect his feelings. You can't make this stuff up." We got home around 11:30 p.m. We sat on our couch, drank a cheap beer, and watched the ball drop on TV in peace. But before we went to bed, Claire turned to me, her face serious. "Arthur, he's going to retaliate," she warned. That look in his eyes wasn't just embarrassment. It was pure rage. Narcissists like him do not handle reality checks well. "He's going to try to hurt you." I thought she was just being cautious. I didn't realize she was predicting the future. For 2 weeks after the New Year's Eve incident, there was absolute silence. Leo went completely dark. No calls, no texts, no passive-aggressive posts on social media. Just a void. Mom, of course, tried to fill that void. She called me 7 times over those 2 weeks, leaving weeping voicemails asking me to be the bigger person and reach out to Leo to apologize. She claimed he was deeply depressed, that his confidence was shattered, and that he hadn't gone to work for days. I ignored every single call. Bigger person or not, I was officially retired from managing Leo's emotional state. Then, on a Tuesday morning in mid-January, my phone buzzed while I was up on a roof inspecting a faulty inverter. It was an automated text alert from my primary bank. "Urgent. Unusual account activity detected. Multiple failed login attempts on your personal savings account from an unrecognized device." My blood ran cold. I climbed down the ladder, got into my truck, and immediately called the bank's fraud department. The representative on the phone verified my identity and pulled up the logs. "Yes, Mr. Arthur," the rep said. "It appears someone attempted to log into your primary savings account from a desktop computer at 3:15 a.m. this morning. The location pings to an IP address in the downtown metropolitan area." "Did they get in?" I asked, my grip tightening on the steering wheel. "No, sir. They had your correct username, and they successfully answered 2 of your security questions. However, the system triggered a mandatory 2-factor authentication text to your mobile device, which they obviously couldn't bypass. After 4 failed attempts to bypass the 2FA, the system locked the account." "Security questions?" I asked. "Which ones?" "Mother's maiden name and the name of your first childhood pet." I closed my eyes and leaned my head back against the headrest. I knew exactly who it was. It wasn't some random Russian hacker. It was my brother. Leo had been holding my unlocked phone at the party. He had stared at my banking app for several minutes while his brain short-circuited. He had more than enough time to memorize my username displayed at the top of the screen. And as for the security questions, Mom is a boomer who treats Facebook like a diary. She constantly participates in those ridiculous viral posts. What was your first pet's name and the street you grew up on? Your new spy name. She had broadcast the answers to my security questions to the entire internet for years. Leo knew all of it. I spent the next 2 hours sitting in my truck, changing every single password I owned. Banking, credit cards, emails, business accounts. I instituted physical authenticator apps instead of text messages. I locked down my credit with all 3 major bureaus. When I got home that night, I told Claire. Her face went stone cold. "Call the police, Arthur," she said instantly, pacing the kitchen. "Right now. He is committing federal fraud. He is trying to steal your money." "Claire, it's just a failed login attempt." I sighed, rubbing my eyes. "The cops won't do anything without concrete damage." "He's not going to stop," she argued. "He's trying to ruin you because you bruised his ego." Against my better judgment, I decided to handle it internally first. I called my parents. The moment Mom picked up, I laid it out for her. I told her that Leo had tried to hack into my bank account at 3 a.m. using my username and her Facebook data. Her reaction was immediate, visceral denial. "Arthur, how dare you? Leo would never commit a crime. He is a good boy. He's just upset." "Mom," someone with my exact username, from his city, tried to steal 200 grand from me in the middle of the night. He held my phone at the party. Dad snatched the phone from her. "Listen to me, Arthur. You are painting your brother as a criminal just to twist the knife. You already humiliated him. Now you're making up conspiracy theories? It was probably just a computer glitch or a hacker from overseas. Stop trying to destroy him. If it happens again, I'm going to the cops," I warned him. "Don't you dare involve outsiders in family business," Dad yelled. "Family protects family." I hung up on him. I tried calling Leo directly. He answered on the second ring, his voice dripping with arrogant, completely fake innocence. "Hey bro, what's up? Stay out of my bank accounts, Leo. I'm warning you once." He let out a sharp, mocking laugh. "I have no idea what you're talking about. Are you getting paranoid out there in the desert, son? Prove it. You can't. You're just desperate to play the victim because you know you just got lucky with a basic service business while I work in actual high finance." He hung up. 3 days later, I got a notification from my identity monitoring service. Someone had applied for a high-limit credit card in my name. The application was flagged and blocked because I had frozen my credit, but it had been submitted using my exact social security number, my full name, and my previous address. 12 hours later, another alert. A personal loan application for $35,000, also submitted online, also blocked. He wasn't just trying to steal what I had. He was trying to bury me in fraudulent debt. He was trying to destroy my financial life so I would fall back below him in the hierarchy. Leo fraudulently took out a $35,000 loan in his own brother's name. This has officially gone way too far. I mean, where does he get off thinking he's entitled to do something like that? Stick around to hear the rest of the story and see how this all blows back on him. I didn't call Mom. I didn't call Dad. I didn't warn Leo. I printed out a stack of paper an inch thick. I had the bank logs showing the exact timestamp and IP address of the login attempts. I had the denied credit card applications showing my social security number. I had the denied loan applications. I took the entire binder, drove down to the main precinct in the city, and asked to speak to a detective in the Financial Crimes Division. I sat across from a tired-looking detective named Miller. I slid the binder across the metal desk. "This is clear-cut identity theft and attempted wire fraud," Detective Miller said, flipping through the pages, his eyes scanning the data. "You have the IP addresses here. You have the exact time logs. Do you have any idea who is targeting you?" "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "My younger brother, Leo." The detective stopped flipping pages. He looked up at me, his expression neutral. He'd been a cop long enough to know that the worst monsters are usually sitting at your Thanksgiving table. You understand that if we pursue this, and the evidence points to him, it's out of your hands, the state will press charges. We're talking multiple felonies. I understand, I said. Do your job. The wheels of justice are usually slow, but when you hand them a perfectly documented case of digital fraud tied directly to a local IP address, they move surprisingly fast. 2 days later, Detective Miller and 2 uniformed officers showed up at Leo's luxury apartment complex at 7 a.m. According to the police report I saw later, Leo opened the door in his silk bathrobe, expecting an Amazon delivery. Instead, he got a warrant. At first, Leo played the arrogant corporate hotshot. He denied everything. He threatened to sue the department. He demanded they call his father. But Detective Miller didn't care about his attitude. They executed the search warrant and confiscated his silver laptop, the same one he used to brag about his portfolio on New Year's Eve, his phone, and an external hard drive. They didn't even have to look hard. When the cybercrimes unit mirrored his hard drive, they found the smoking gun. Leo wasn't a criminal mastermind. He was a sloppy, entitled amateur. Saved directly on his desktop was an Excel spreadsheet titled Underscorted. Inside that spreadsheet was my full name, my social security number, my date of birth, my bank routing and account numbers, and the answers to my security questions. His device fingerprint, the unique hardware identifier of his specific laptop, perfectly matched the device used to submit the fraudulent credit card and loan applications. The IP address logged by my bank matched his apartment's router perfectly. They arrested him on the spot. They put the golden child in handcuffs, marched him through the polished lobby of his luxury building in front of all his wealthy neighbors, and put him in the back of a squad car. He was officially charged with 3 counts of felony identity theft, 2 counts of attempted wire fraud, and 1 count of unauthorized computer access. When the mugshot hit the system, my phone exploded. It wasn't just a few calls. It was an avalanche of panic. Mom called me 22 times in the span of 3 hours before I finally answered. The moment the connection opened, a sound came through the speaker that I had never heard before. It was a guttural, hysterical shriek of absolute terror. "Arthur, you monster! You evil, vindictive monster!" Mom screamed, sobbing so hard she could barely form the words. "How could you do this to your brother? They took him. He's in a holding cell. He's wearing an orange jumpsuit. You have to call the police right now and tell them it was a misunderstanding." I sat at my kitchen table, watching Claire pour me a cup of coffee. I felt a strange, cold calm wash over me. "I didn't do anything to him, Mom. He committed 3 felonies. I just handed them the paperwork." Dad grabbed the phone, his voice shaking with rage. "Arthur, listen to me very carefully. You are destroying this family. You are ruining Leo's entire life. A felony conviction will ban him from the financial sector forever. His career will be over. You have to drop the charges." "I can't drop the charges, Dad," I explained, speaking slowly as if I were talking to a toddler. "That's not how the law works. The district attorney is pressing charges on behalf of the state. My cooperation just guarantees he goes to prison." "He made a mistake," Mom wailed in the background. "He was just angry and confused. He wasn't thinking clearly. He's your baby brother. A mistake is dropping a glass," I countered, my voice hardening. "Logging into a bank at 3 a.m. is a choice. Opening a spreadsheet with my social security number is a choice. Applying for $40,000 in fraudulent debt is a calculated, malicious crime spree. He tried to ruin my life because his ego got bruised." "You provoked him," Dad shouted. "You humiliated him with your money." That was the breaking point, the sheer, blinding audacity of it. "I paid my debt to this family 14 years ago." I roared into the phone, slamming my fist onto the table. "I paid it when I was 22, when he destroyed my truck, my livelihood, and you forced me to take the blame so his precious college record wouldn't be stained. I rode a bus in the rain for a year and a half for him. I built my life from nothing while you funded his delusions. I am done paying for his mistakes. He's 31 years old. It's time he pays his own tab." Arthur, please, Mom begged, her voice dropping to a pathetic whimper. If you do this, you are dead to us. We will never forgive you. You made your choice decades ago, Mom, I said quietly. Leo was your family. I was just the mistake you were stuck with. Enjoy visiting him behind glass. I hung up the phone and blocked both of their numbers. The court process dragged on for 4 agonizing months. Leo's expensive defense attorney, paid for by Robert and Martha emptying their retirement accounts, tried every trick in the book. They tried to claim Leo was having a mental health crisis. They tried to claim the computer was hacked. They repeatedly reached out to the DA's office, trying to negotiate a plea deal that involved 0 jail time, just community service and probation. The prosecutor, a hard-nosed woman who despised financial predators, wasn't having an ounce of it. The fact that Leo had specifically targeted a family member out of malice actually made the prosecution push harder. The evidence was insurmountable. There was no defense against the spreadsheet on his own desktop. Facing the reality of a potential 10-year sentence if he took it to a jury trial and lost, Leo finally broke. He took a plea deal. He pled guilty to 2 felony counts. The judge, clearly unimpressed by Leo's weeping apologies in the courtroom, handed down the sentence. 2 years in the county penitentiary, followed by 4 years of strict, supervised probation and mandatory restitution for the cost of the financial investigation. On the day of the sentencing, Mom found a way to bypass my block by using a prepaid burner phone. She left a 3-minute voicemail. I listened to it once, just to hear the final death rattle of my toxic family. Your brother is being taken away in handcuffs because of you, she hissed, her voice dripping with pure, concentrated hatred. I hope you are happy with your money, Arthur. I hope you choke on it. You have destroyed this family. I hope someday, when you are old and alone, you realize the magnitude of the evil you've committed. This is 100% on OP's parents. At the end of the day, Leo is responsible for his own actions, but by playing favorites and constantly coddling him, the parents created this monster. And now they're finally paying the price, and it's a heavy one. You would think that seeing their golden child locked in a 6x8 concrete cell would be the ultimate reality check for my parents. You would think it would force them to look in the mirror. You would be wrong. It only poured gasoline on their delusion. Because they couldn't blame Leo, and they couldn't blame themselves, I became the absolute villain in their warped narrative. The harassment campaign they launched was relentless and unhinged. They bought cheap prepaid phones and called me constantly from different numbers, leaving screaming voicemails. They showed up at our house unannounced, banging on the front door at 9 p.m., screaming that I was a traitor. They mobilized the entire extended family, sending aunts and cousins to my inbox with long, guilt-tripping essays about forgiveness and Christian duty. They posted vague, passive-aggressive rants on Facebook about ungrateful children and the betrayal of blood. I ignored most of it. I upgraded our home security system, installed high-definition cameras covering every angle of the property, and changed all our locks. I thought if I just kept my head down, they would eventually burn themselves out. But they kept escalating. They crossed the line from annoying to dangerous. One afternoon, Dad managed to track down one of my remote job sites. I was working on a massive 50-megawatt solar array 2 hours deep into the Nevada desert. I was strapped into a harness, 30 feet up in the air, replacing a heavy torque tube. I looked down, and Dad's SUV was parked right next to my work truck, kicking up a cloud of dust. He got out, his face purple with rage, completely ignoring the hard hat safety zone. I climbed down the ladder, wiping grease off my hands. You put your brother in a cage, Dad screamed, stepping into my personal space, his fists clenched. Leo put himself in a cage, Dad, I said, not backing up an inch. Now get off my job site. This is restricted commercial property. He made one mistake, Dad roared, spit flying from his lips. He was emotional, and you destroyed his life over it. Family doesn't throw each other to the wolves over money. It wasn't about money, I said, my voice eerily calm. It was about Leo thinking he owned me. He thought he was entitled to my identity. You raised him to believe the world owed him everything, and the law just explained to him that he's wrong. He raised a fist, trembling, looking like he actually wanted to swing at me. You arrogant bastard. Don't blame us for your lack of empathy. We raised you both the exact same way. I let out a harsh, dry laugh. Name one time, just one specific time you helped me after my 18th birthday. He opened his mouth. His jaw worked, but no sound came out. The absolute silence of the desert hung between us. Get off my sight, Robert, I said, dropping the title of Dad. If you ever come near my crew again, I'll have you arrested for trespassing. He left, but Mom tried a different, more vindictive approach. She started stalking Claire. She showed up at Claire's engineering firm, waiting in the parking lot to corner her during her lunch break. The second time Mom managed to slip past the lobby receptionist and ambush Claire near the elevators, screaming that she was a poisonous witch who manipulated me. Claire didn't engage. She just called building security. 2 massive security guards escorted Mom out of the building and issued her a formal, legal trespass warning on company letterhead. That night, Claire came home, put her briefcase down, and looked at me. Arthur, we have to fight back. Lawfully. If we don't, they are never going to stop. They think they can bleed us to death. She was right. I was done running. I was done accommodating their insanity. We hired a brutal, highly rated family law attorney. We filed for permanent restraining orders against Robert, Martha, and Leo, effective upon his release. We didn't just ask for them. We buried the court in evidence. We submitted the 47 blocked voicemails, the terrifying security footage of them banging on our door at night, the sworn witness statements from Claire's office security, and the police report of Dad trespassing at my commercial site. The court date arrived a month later. Mom and Dad showed up looking haggard, staring at me across the courtroom like I had murdered someone. The judge, a no-nonsense older man, reviewed the massive binder of evidence. He looked at the call logs, watched the video of Mom screaming in the lobby, and sighed. Mr. and Mrs. Smith, the judge said, peering over his glasses. Do you have any legal defense or response to these allegations of severe, repeated harassment? Mom's voice cracked. She tried to play the ultimate victim card. Your Honor, we are just loving parents. We are just trying to maintain a relationship with our son during a family crisis. The judge slammed his hand on the desk. According to these records, your son has explicitly asked you, repeatedly, to cease all contact. You continued to ambush his wife at her place of employment and trespass on his commercial job sites. Biological relationships do not grant you immunity from stalking and harassment laws, ma'am. He signed the orders right there. A permanent 500-foot minimum distance requirement. Absolute zero contact. Not via phone, not via email, not through third-party relatives, and not through social media. Any violation meant immediate arrest and contempt of court charges. Mom broke down into loud, ugly sobs, burying her face in her hands. Dad just stared at me, his eyes dead and full of rage. I felt absolutely nothing for them. Just a profound, sweeping wave of relief. We walked out of the courthouse into the bright afternoon sun, and for the first time in 36 years, I felt like the air was finally clean. 6 months after the restraining orders were signed, Claire and I made our move. We didn't run away, we upgraded. We used a portion of the savings that my family had been so desperately jealous of and bought a beautiful, sprawling 4-bedroom house in a quiet, upscale neighborhood. We finally had the space to actually live, not just survive. My business didn't just survive the drama, it thrived. Without the constant mental drain of my family's toxicity, I poured my energy into expansion. I bought 3 brand new work trucks, hired 3 more full-time technicians, and secured a massive contract with the county to maintain the solar grids on all municipal buildings. Every once in a while, they test the boundaries. A birthday card will arrive in the mail with no return address, or a distant cousin will send me a Facebook message saying, "Your mom is really sick. She just wants to hear your voice." I don't respond. I toss the cards in the fire pit and block the cousins. The restraining orders are a shield of iron, and I will never let it drop. Uncle Dave reached out one final time about a year ago. He had stayed mostly neutral through the entire explosion, which I respected enough to meet him for coffee. He looked tired, older than I remembered. "Arthur," Dave said, wrapping his hands around his mug, "your parents aren't getting any younger. Leo is struggling in prison. Don't you think you've made your point? Don't you want to reconcile before they pass away and it's too late?" "No, Dave, I don't." He looked surprised, expecting me to show some hesitation or hidden guilt. "But they are your blood. Being a parent requires more than biology, Dave," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "It requires protection, love, and respect. They made their choices every single day for 30 years. They chose the son who stole from them, lied to them, and tried to steal from me. I'm just honoring their choice by removing myself from the equation." He studied my face for a long time, searching for a crack in my armor. He didn't find one. He nodded slowly. "All right, Arthur. You've built a good life for yourself. Protect it. Some people talk about family like it's a sacred, unbreakable bond. Like sharing DNA means you owe someone your sanity, your money, and your peace of mind. I learned the hard way that blood is just a biological accident. Real family is supposed to build you up, not tear you down to make someone else look taller. Real family celebrates your successes. They don't try to steal them. My real family is Claire. It's her parents, who welcome me with open arms and respect my hustle. It's the loyal guys on my work crew who show up at 5 a.m. in the freezing cold to get the job done. As for the people who raised me, the brother who tried to destroy me, they are just cautionary tales. Ghosts of a past life that I no longer inhabit. Leo is sitting in a 6x8 cell, stripped of his suits, his arrogance, and his future, realizing that the real world doesn't care if his mommy thinks he's special. I'm standing in the desert sun, looking out over a solar farm that I help keep alive, knowing that every dollar in my bank account and every ounce of respect I have was earned with my own two hands. Sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't retaliation. It's radical, unapologetic success, built on the ashes of the people who tried to burn you. What an incredibly satisfying yet infuriating story. Let's unpack this. In my honest opinion, Arthur did absolutely everything right. The level of patience he showed for 36 years is saint-like. When your own blood constantly treats you like a background character and tries to ruin you, eventually you have to write your own script. Getting that permanent restraining order and letting Leo face the legal consequences of his felonies was the ultimate healthy boundary. You do not protect abusers just because you share DNA. Let's look at what the Reddit community had to say, because this thread was on fire. User SolarFlare99 says, "You took the fall for his DUI when you were 22, and he repaid you by trying to ruin your credit and steal your life savings. The fact that your parents wanted you to drop the charges shows they are just as guilty. Enjoy your wealth." I completely agree. The DUI incident alone was enough to cut them off forever. OP is a better man than I am for even answering their calls after that. But we have a different take from user devil_advocate_2024 who says, "Yes, your brother is a literal criminal, but you flashing a $215,000 bank balance at a New Year's Eve party was just petty. You knew he was an insecure narcissist, and you deliberately provoked him just to gloat." Honestly, I have to hard disagree with this take. Arthur didn't provoke anyone. He was sitting quietly in the den minding his own business. Leo literally grabbed his phone and demanded to see it to humiliate him in front of the whole family. Arthur just handed him the reality check he specifically asked for. That's not being petty. That's just karma. Finally, user Desert Rose adds, "Honestly, why didn't you go no contact years ago? You and Claire should have walked away completely after that horrible first dinner." And yeah, I think we can all agree with that. The signs were there for decades, and sometimes holding on to hope just brings more pain. But I want to know what you guys think. Did Arthur go too far by not dropping the felony charges? Or did Leo get exactly what he deserved for his vicious revenge plot? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you loved this crazy story, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel for more Reddit drama, and I'll see you guys in the next video.